Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is Iron Torch 20, and see, instead of doing a immediate react video, this time I decided to do a more or less a finale preview, because guess what? We're at the end of Samurai Jack, and what we're going to do is just talk about the previous episode and how it's going to impact the finale and go into predictions, and you know, you guys can post your predictions in the comments too, if you want. But first, let's just get into the recap. It starts a little bit with what happened afterwards, and then you had Ashi and Jack kissing and then apologizing to each other afterwards, and then Ashi ends up finding some new clothes, and Jack ends up getting cleaned up. So then, after all that's done, they do head out of the monolith and back into the desert to wherever their journey was going. So then, Ashi does ask Jack about his home and how everything was, and I do love the visuals they used to provide the description of home, although it was a little bit better in Jack Remembers the Past, but that was because it was more centered around that. So then, Jack does describe everything, and this does make Ashi feel worse for him, and then actually want him to succeed, which is one thing I do appreciate, because I mean, this is more about Ashi starting to care about people and starting to care about him as this went on. So then, afterwards, they went to... So then Jack went alone, and I thought it was pretty interesting that the other bearded Jack showed up in his hallucination and then said, "Be careful," to present Jack, which then makes you wonder if he tried again to defeat the Guardian, but then couldn't. But either way, I'm getting a little bit too ahead of myself here, so what happens after that is that Jack ends up going alone to the portal where the Guardian once was, and it is implied that the Guardian was killed. So then you see his glasses, or his sunglasses, all shattered. And that's really the only thing you see. But then, eventually, one of my questions did end up getting answered, and that was Scaramouche going to Aku and saying that Jack lost his sword. But then, I do also like how Scaramouche and Aku were boogieing together, or just dancing together after he finds out about that news. I mean, that's just one little glimpse, or just one little nice touch about Aku's personality, which is one thing I do appreciate. But anyway, after that, Aku goes to the place where Jack and Ashi were, and then he ends up finding out about the sword and then just blasts Scaramouche on the spot. And then I also like his little impression of Jack where he's like, but why now? I don't know, that's just something worth mentioning. So then, it does turn out that eventually Aku figures out that Ashi does have his DNA, which is one thing I kind of liked was his backstory where he's like, wait, there was this one time, and then he makes it sound like he knocked up a girl during a one-night stand, but then again, it turns out what happened was he just showed up to that temple where they all were, and then, like, filled up a little chalice of himself, and then one of the girls ended up drinking it and ended up giving birth to the daughters of Aku, which was a pretty interesting way to put it. So then, what happened after that was, Aku was able to manipulate Ashi into fighting Jack. So then, he ends up turning her into this, incarnate of himself. But then, you see at the end that Aku is holding Jack's sword while, Ashi's about to attack him. And then they, stop at that image, which was a pretty intense image. I will say that, the second half of that episode was probably one of the most intense parts of the entire series. Especially the confrontation with Jack and Aku, and then how tense everything was. And then it was one of those episodes where I couldn't believe it was a half hour already. So that is definitely something that the episode got right, was the pacing, as well as all the intense stuff at the end. So either way, that was a terrific episode, and definitely a good build-up to the finale, which is one of the reasons I kind of delayed this video, just because I want to get into a finale preview. Some of the unanswered questions were which I think will be answered in the last episode, where what happened to the Guardian, and also whether or not he actually was alive, but then just ran away. Even though I don't think he would have. But because all you really saw was his glasses, you didn't really see anything else. So, who really knows? And then, what about Flora and the rest of the Scott's daughters? What happens with them? Because I think they are, or just as a quick prediction, I do think they are going to show up at some point in this episode and end up helping Jack. So then, one of the last questions being, what happens with Jack's sword, and he did end up dropping it when he was forced to fight Ashi, and then that's when Aku ended up seizing it. And I don't think Aku's going to make the same mistake he did in the graveyard episode. I mean, I'm pretty sure he does remember that. So, I mean, for me, I do get the feeling he is going to need some outside help. But the question is, where is he going to get it from? And then, let's see, another question another unanswered question is, if there are no more time portals, what happens afterwards? And I do think, that Jack isn't really going to make it back to the past, and I think the moral of the story is going to be that, even though he does defeat Aku in the future, but I do think the moral of the story will be that you can't really change the past, but you are in control of your future. I don't know, that's just my single prediction, and once again, like I said, I welcome any predictions in the comments. So, let's see, also, I guess another unanswered question I have for the finale is, what about any other bounty hunters that Aku has? But there haven't really been any characters that were revealed in this episode, and yeah, I think other than the Mad Jack episode where there were just a ton of bounty hunters at once, the bounty hunters weren't really much of an issue in this particular part of the series. And then, of course, there was the Princess and the Bounty Hunters. There was that episode, too, but I'm kind of getting off on a tangent here. Also, I guess, some of the other parts are, what about the blind archers if they end up helping them? And then, last but not least, what happens with Ashi if, Jack ends up defeating Aku? I don't know. I mean, personally, I don't think she's going to survive this episode. But I think that's, depending on if Aku uses her as a shield or if, Jack ends up, succeeding in killing Aku and then that somehow kills Ashi too. Well, who knows. But either way, that's... Alright, I think that's, gonna be it for this, finale preview, so... Are you predicting victory or death?